Okay, this is my first attempt at this, so we'll just see how it goes. So the point of this little film is there's a number of different points. One of them is to show you how to make a film and how straightforward it can be with luck, and secondly to show you how ideas from lectures can be turned into dissertations by students using their own initiative, by taking particular empirical ideas, particular theoretical ideas, linking them with method and turning them into a dissertation. So this is 15 slides taken from one of those dissertations, 15,000 words put down to 15 slides. So this is a question from a dissertation student last year. What challenge does graffiti pose to the imposed doxa of mainstream capitalist society? A case study of Stokes Croft in Bristol. This is clearly culturally influenced by the cultural space and pace course. The student really liked the work on graffiti, theoretical ideas of space and place and power, particularly ideas of doxa and orthodoxy from Pierre Bourdieu, and he's taking that empirical idea, theoretical ideas, and looking at them at a case study, particularly in Stokes Croft in Bristol. So as he says, introduction, your first major chapter, this dissertation is concerned with the impact of graffiti and its effectiveness in challenging the doxa of mainstream capitalist society. After expanding on that, he then gave us a little introduction to Stokes Croft itself. Stokes Croft is in a city area in the district of St Paul's, which has a long history of alternative and subversive culture. It's become the headquarters of the People's Republic of Stokes Croft. This is an activist group who, seeing the gentrification of Bristol in general, say we don't want that form of regeneration in our community. It will lose the sense of place that is Stokes Croft. They want to create themselves a socially and environmentally sustainable community that is different to the rest of consumer-driven capitalist society. So that's what the student outlined in his introduction, and he takes it forward by asking some three key questions. What every dissertation needs: an introduction to some key questions. Does place matter in the practice of graffiti? What's the role of geography here? What's the impact of graffiti in Stokes Croft? What political effect does it have? And bringing it all to a conclusion, what challenge does it mount to mainstream authority? This is what his dissertation seeks to do, and as it moves forward, the next major chapter is a literature or theory chapter. And as we've seen from the title, it's about doxas. Of course, he needs to explain this to the reader. In considering whether the practice of graffiti has to transgress or resist the imposed doxa of Western society, it's important to explain what is meant by doxa. Define your terms. The term doxa was theorised by the French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu, who drew from Durkheim's concept of the collective consciousness. Key to the Bourdieu concept was the emphasis on common sense as a mechanism of social control. And how does this play in geography? Well, he turned to the work of Tim Creswell to look at this. Creswell has written on the concept of doxa, highlighting that for the dominant culture to effectively establish and be successful, it must make its world seem to be the natural world, the common sense world. Doxa is different from orthodoxy, because orthodoxy implies some awareness of alternative experience. The doxic experience is the only experience. It's taken for granted, it's unquestioned, it's the only way to be, it's the most natural way to be in the world. In the doxic experience there is no social conflict because there's no choice. Individuals aspire to achieve their social fit in society. Everyone wants to fit in, no one wants to transgress, no one wants to resist. There is an established order and everyone wants to be part of it. And yet, is any system of power ever complete? Does everyone always conform? There might be acts of transgression and there might be acts of resistance. Resistance is that which seeks to intentionally oppose, challenge and dispute acts of domination. If you like, it seeks to challenge doxa. According to the student, graffiti can serve as a reminder that the dominant culture is not omnipotent and can act to open our eyes to the oppression that we willingly condone and perpetuate on a daily basis. So that's the theoretical underpinnings of his dissertation, which he expanded upon in his thesis. And then he employed some methods. If those are the questions, what methods can help answer those questions? He used three main forms of qualitative data collection: interactive interviewing, written descriptions by participants, and some forms of participant observation. And he triangulated these three methods of qualitative data collection alongside local and national media, theoretical ideas that we've already touched upon, and campaigning information released by the People's Republic of Stokes Croft. So, let's look at some of the questions he asked and how he answered them in a nutshell. Let's look at these pictures. These pictures are stencils that are put up by the PRSC's chairman, Chris Chalkley, and this is right on the boundaries of Stokes Croft and mainstream Bristol. As you can see, it says, "Welcome to Stokes Croft, the cultural quarter, conservation area, outdoor gallery," kind of playing with ideas of museums and art and all this sort of stuff. They are entering this neighbourhood, and yet this graffiti is right on the border. Is it in Stokes Croft or is it outside Stokes Croft? I.e., does place matter? As the student writes, Chris Chalkley was charged with criminal damage for painting graffiti on the outskirts of Stokes Croft, on this boundary point. His artistic innovations are either ignored or met with a certain degree of approval within the confines of Stokes Croft, as we'll see. But when he began to challenge the authority of the council by putting up this sign on the outskirts of it, he was immediately arrested by the police. These actions, although tolerated within Stokes Croft, when attempted on the limits of it, are distinctly out of place, to use Creswell's terms, i.e. he was coming into conflict with the mainstream by doing it in the place of the mainstream, let's say. He was out of place and immediately arrested. This was a criminal act. Within the space of Stokes Croft, graffiti is looked at very differently. The PRSC have set up cultural markers throughout Stokes Croft to emphasise their own cultural values, like the Stokes Croft sign for Stokes Croft. They paint all the little bins yellow. No one arrests them for doing this. This is kind of celebrated and enjoyed. This is a different place. It's run by different cultural values. It's set up by a different cultural group. Although the police, etc., have a degree of control in here, it's almost as if these alternative set of values dominate this situation. As the writer said, these cultural markers seek to challenge the authority of the council and seem to act as visual manifestations of what this place stands for. He quotes Johnston directly: "The conscious creation and manipulation of place images, like bill posters, telephone boxes, litter bins, etc., by manipulating in the advertising, the architectural coding, the place promotion and naming strategies have become distinguishing features of planning and representing place. And as such, this place is different. This graffiti makes a different place through its presence and practice." He then goes on to ask, what is the impact of graffiti in Stokes Croft? He writes, "I had entered into the study thinking that graffiti stood as a political gesture, giving a visual middle finger to authority. My interpretation of graffiti was in accordance with the findings of Nandria, who states graffiti violates the proper order, the proper owner, challenging his authority and forcibly invades spaces. It uses this force to stake out spaces and shows a blind disregard for the claims of others. Graffiti takes and makes place, as he's argued on the previous slide. And this is what perhaps seen from the mainstream authorities when they arrested Chris Chalkley on the outside of Stokes Croft. He was challenging their authority here, and that was inappropriate." We can see on this slide the ways in which, however, this ongoing battle for control of the inner bits of Stokes Croft through graffiti can be shown. We see the picture on the top left. This is a bit of artwork that was done on a derelict shop. Now, the PRSC had permission from the council to create this as almost a gallery space. But as you see on the top right, then the council painted over it, even though they'd given permission. The bottom left, we can see that this painting over, this blackening out of this artwork is seen by people who live in Stokes Croft as vandalism. This mural was removed illegally by Bristol City Council. We should protest against this. But yet again, the council painted over this sign, battling again, trying to say, no, we are in control, we're going to say who paints what and where. And then, as we see on the bottom right, another graffiti. I said, when will you learn? You're just making things worse, says that graffiti. In other words, whatever you do, we are going to take our control back. This is our place, and we will we will control and determine what goes on in this place, and you won't. So as Chalkley says, there was a corner shop on the edge of Highgrove Street where there were hoardings and we got permission to paint on it. The piece itself wasn't intentionally political, however it generated a political storm, and the council buffed it out for reasons best known to itself. My response to that was to paint on another piece, saying about council vandalism, and asked passers-by to voice their protest by emailing the chief executive of Bristol City Council. Okay. So we can see there that graffiti can be a very political weapon to challenge the mainstream culture. However, it's also possible that the practice of graffiti is neither a political stunt nor a direct challenge to dominant society. When he asked graffiti artists why you used graffiti, they weren't that inherently political in their motivations. As the first respondent said, for me, graffiti isn't a political thing. It's hard to explain my motivation. I've been doing it since I was 12, like 20 years now. All I'm doing is writing my name. It's about style and letters. And sometimes doing it just for the sake of it, just for fun. It's just what I do. Another guy said, well, the meaning is to develop style. It's a meditation in style. I don't do it for any other reason. I am not trying to break down the walls of conventional society. I'm just doing it because I like art and I like improving my style. So what this student found, he completely undermined his existing thoughts. He added to theory, he found new stuff out through his dissertation. This is what dissertations can do through the appropriate methods. And this is what he put in his empirical chapters. So, his final question then, does graffiti pose a successful challenge to mainstream society? What his thesis came together to answer. The PRSC answered that question in the following way. You only have to go to the bottom of Stokes Croft, walk across to Broadmead and see the new development at Cabot Circus. Bristol City Council have sold the streets in the centre of Bristol to private corporations. So all the streets within Cabot Circus are owned by these private corporations and they determine how you behave in those spaces. You see all these juxtapositions and a huge contrast. It becomes apparent that in this street art is only a metaphor for attempting to retain some independence against what is happening all over the world, where corporate bodies determine the direction in which our social fabric develops. So they say, well, why is this interesting? It's just graffiti, it's just cultural geography. No, it shows how different groups in society are imposing their ideas of what good culture is and ignoring what other people's idea of good culture is. And from this point of view, at least, corporate culture is taking over, and the private individual or the the public community, in terms of alternative cultures, should have some sort of control over the city. That's why graffiti is important. Bristol City Council has a different view. I don't think any graffiti is going to act as a serious challenge to the dominant capitalist society, but it can be an interesting counterpoint, or at least add some visual interest and life to a street, so they're not completely outlawing it. They're saying in the right place, at the right time, by the right people. This student takes a balanced view in his conclusion, what every academic has to do: look at the pros and the cons and come to some sort of conclusion. This is what he found in his dissertation. It was found that graffiti did pose somewhat of a threat to the mainstream authority, but the extent of this threat is difficult to quantify. And in his view, perhaps most important is the symbolism of graffiti. Its mere presence serves to challenge, or at least force us to reconsider the values of mainstream culture. So doxa is no longer doxa, it becomes orthodoxy. So, in a nutshell, what the student did therefore is take the ideas from the power lectures in culture, space and place, used them with a bit of graffiti and made it into his own project, took those ideas, played them out in a new empirical area, and produced a first-class dissertation at the end of the day. And hopefully this has given you some ideas and shown you what's possible, and also given you some inspiration to do your own.